Order. Um, Getting us started on this beautiful, hot spring day. Before we get started with our first order of business, which is public comment, I have an addition to the agenda, which is as soon as we finish public comment and the consent agenda, we're gonna invite some of our French 5 students up for a presentation to the board and the community about what they've been up to recently, which I'm very excited about. So that's the only agenda change. So let's go ahead and get started with our first order of business, which is public comment. Do we have anyone in the room for public comment? I don't think so. Anyone online raising their hands? You just have to use the raise hand function or officially, yeah, I think you just have to use the raise hand function, which is at the bottom of your screen.
I do not see anybody.
Okay. All right, well then let's move into the consent agenda, which is just a number of minutes from previous meetings and the warrant and things like payroll for us to pass as one lump sum, unless there's any board member who feels there's a need to discuss any one of these items. But let's start with if there's someone who can make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move.
All right, thanks, Scott. Is there a second?
A second.
All right, thanks, Jake. Any discussion?
So I had a question about the climate survey summary. I can't remember what we've done in the past, but are we going to have an opportunity at some point in a future meeting to talk about the results?
No, that would be right now, if you wanted to ask any questions about it.
Mm-hmm. I looked at it quickly and yeah, I think we should pull it from the consent agenda. And
Okay.
if there's not time tonight to talk about it, maybe, I guess we only have one more meeting, but
Right.
yeah, I don't know. There seem to be some important things to talk about beyond it just be, for it to not just be sort of passed with the consent agenda.
Okay, well, we can put that at the bottom of tonight's agenda for discussion, and we probably will have time for it.
Okay,
Okay,
cool.
So we're moving the consent agenda minus the climate survey summary. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is all set. So bienvenue. And we know you have a video for us, so Libby's gonna get that queued up so we can watch it.
My name is Georgia Tanner. I'm a senior at Montpelier High School, and I've been doing French for all of high school, some of middle school. Just got back from the French exchange trip. We went to Angers and Paris.
Yeah, I'm Graham. I'm a junior. I've been doing French since 8th grade, and yeah, I also just got back, and we're just gonna show you guys this little video that we made just to present our experience.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hopefully there's sound. Should there be music playing right now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, do I just hit this?
You have to do it before you.
Look at this.
Oh, fantastic.
How many degrees do I need?
It's a problem with the
I think.
yeah with the right.
One second. Oh. You stopped me. Do you guys want to hum?
We spent a lot of time looking at the Paris metro map so that we could know where to do projects on presentations about like historical sites in Paris so that we knew where we were going to visit.
And wherever we turned, there was something new and exciting to see.
I mainly used my French whenever I was in like a restaurant or public area, like just to ask for directions or order for different foods.
It was a cool experience because speaking in French to like a native French speaker is a lot different from speaking to my peers, and I think that really, you know, got me better at French, really improved my experience.
Paris experience.
I really liked how we had a really good like mix of structured time where we were like doing stuff, going to places, but then also like unstructured time where we could like wander around the Marais, or like when I rode the metro from I think we rode from Sacré-Cœur with Owen and Graham. As chaperones, you're okay with just like letting us go alone. Like you heard the plan, you understood that like we were going to be careful and responsible, and you kind of trusted us, and that was really nice. And I think having like that level of like freedom was really cool.
I learned a lot about the French history. Like in Angers, when we went to Peu de Faux, I learned a lot about the French history and like all kinds of different like periods and stuff. It's really cool.
So it's gonna seem like really small, but like they just like eat really late, and like even when they eat, they always have bread with their dinner, and they don't use like wipe up their dinner or like wipe their plates, which was like really interesting, very I think useful. I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that video gave a few highlights of things that we did over our trip. It talked about how we used our French, how some of the things that we got to do. So it was a really great experience. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, if there are any questions, for that.
Did you see the kids who came over from France there?
Yes, we spent our first 3 days in Paris on our own, living in a hostel, and then for the next 7 days, we spent our times living with the people that came here. So we did a little like flip where the people that stayed with us, we got to go stay with them.
That's great.
Where is Angers?
Angers, it was about a 2.5 hour train ride away from Paris. So a bit far, but not super far. It's like
It's in the north of France.
Yeah.
Not too far.
What was your favorite thing that you did?
I think honestly meeting all the like new people and speaking French to everybody, that was just really cool. Because I think that created like a great sort of, different experience to see the other culture and see how other people interact.
Yeah, I was also gonna say, I just loved the challenge of being able to speak in French with people. Anytime I'd go into a store or a restaurant, I'd try and see how long I could speak in French before they realized I was not a native speaker. And sometimes I'd get really close, but they always got me in the end. But it was so amazing, yeah.
When I lived in Austria, my German was so bad that when I spoke in German, they answered in English. And I was like, come on, you understood what I said.
Experience or thing.
We actually had like a little surprise planned for us. I think it was on our last day in Paris, or last like full day in Paris, where we got to go to like a light show, and we didn't know it was a light show because it was in this dome in this sort of like cool medieval building, which looked like, and like it apparently has Napoleon in it, there's Napoleon, and it was this really neat like light show that I guess that was probably the coolest like Paris part was my hostel. So
It was so beautiful.
yeah, it was very unexpected.
What really shocked me was the price difference of everything there. Everything was significantly cheaper in Europe than anything here. Even though, of course, it's euros to USD, it was like the average coffee that I got was about €2, which is just like a little over $2 in USD, €2 to €3. Over here, of course, it's like $5, $6. So the price was just everything costing so crazy.
Oh, and did Paris FC win when you were there?
They lost actually. Unfortunately. So, I mean, can't win everything, you know.
It was still really cool to work with.
You all put a lot of work in to like make money for it and work. Savard back there was the champion of these trips and then went away from the family for a week over April break. What would you say to kids who are worried about like the workload or leaving mom and dad, or what would you say to them about your experience?
I would say in terms of the work building up to the trip, it's really a lot more fun than you would think work. The experience of working in the crepe cart is just, it feels so good to be able to like give to the community, like at the farmers markets and such. Because everybody that comes and gets a crepe, they're all happy. They love it. It's so much fun. The work is like kind of fun. You feel all important and responsible. And in terms of being gone, you're having so much fun and you're doing so much packed into each day that it just goes away so quickly. So the nerves of traveling and being far away and in a different country overseas, it's so overshadowed by just how awesome of an opportunity it is to be there.
Yeah, I also think it's definitely worth it. Like the work, it's definitely like 100% worth it because that trip at the end is just so you get to bond with your friends and like the other people going. And even while working, you can talk to the people who you're going to be going on a trip with. And it's a really good, I guess, like connecting experience.
What's the troglodyte?
Those were the caves that we went and explored.
They're the limestone caves, I believe, that are all man-made, which is the difference that we learned between that and natural caves.
Yeah.
So that was
Like
really
the area that we were in, it was in like the part of France that was connected during time, and so like it used to be an ocean, so the stone is really soft, and they were able to create caves out of it, and I guess that's what a troglodyte is, like man-made cave.
Huh. Somebody called me a troglodyte in high school. I thought it was what it is.
Cool. Any more questions? All right.
I can just say I talked to Drew and Ashley, Miss Dubois, and they were like, I'm going. So Brigitte, you got 2 chaperones in them forever. 'Cause
Yeah,
like the kids were
honestly.
awesome and it was so much fun and they just raved about it. So even the adults.
I believe it.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming out to share that with us. Okay, so moving along, our board discussion orders of business are just sharing a recap and debriefing the transition year from students attending Roxbury Village School to Union Elementary School, and then we'll have a presentation on the continuous improvement plan. So we have a little bit of a slideshow to help us recap this transition year, and this was in part because of a request from Rhett and Casey that we spend some time doing this. And I think it's a really good idea because this was a big transition for our community. And I think anytime you have a big transition, it's good to look back and say, what were some of the highlights and what were some of the challenges and what could we be doing more of or better moving forward? So that's meant the spirit of this little debrief and recap. So would you be able to pull up that slideshow that I shared with you, and then I'll kick it to Rhett and Casey. And then when they are finished sharing some of the information that we gathered from Roxbury families, we also have Casey here to share a presentation on the Bridges After School program. So we can hear about a little bit more in depth about one of the things that, spoiler alert, has been a real highlight from the past year. When that's all finished, we I can open up for a second public comment period to hear if there's other folks who come in from the community who have more to share. But we also, if we don't have anyone to do.
No.
There.
I'm not doing it myself, yeah.
All right. Oh, got it. Okay.
So I think, to compile some of this information, we both looked at the email survey, which got some limited response, but Rhett and I also set out on the playground at the end of Bridges and had a conversation mostly with kids, but a few adults stopped by too. But it was really, I found it very heartening to talk to the kiddos. I think they were a lot more insightful than maybe I anticipated, and they had some really good feedback. So on the whole, I summarize things by saying it's probably what you'd expect. There's been some really great things, there's been frustrating things, probably right in line with where you expected them to be going through the transition process from the beginning. So for some of the successes, I think everyone had really great things to say about UES. They had a great experience with the teachers and the education they were getting and the access to different opportunities for growth. So the kids brought up the specials a lot. They loved some of the specials programming. So they're normal elementary school. Exactly. But I think they did see that there was a difference in what they had access to here in Roxbury versus being at UES, and maybe some of the consistency that they were seeing in specials, and being able to see things regularly and see the day-to-day actions, not just when you're in specials. I think they absolutely appreciated being able to see some of the Roxbury adults and Miss Casey for many reasons, Bridges in particular, but her name came up often in just being in the UES space and being able to be that transition person who knows something about your family and can pull you out for some special time if needed, help you get through the day when things were particularly overwhelming in the beginning. So the kids definitely saw that and saw the effort that was being put in to support them at UES and appreciated them. I think some of the feedback from parents, and Rhett, you should feel free to jump in at any point here. I'm not going to go through these in order necessarily, but some of the feedback from parents who said their kiddos were getting access to some of the academic needs in a different way than they got at RVS, and that it worked well, and that they felt like the pathway to communicate with UES and get things addressed was fairly smooth, and the families were kind of brought along into the academic setting from the get-go, and in a way that really made kind of the connections with the new teachers and the new staff fairly smooth. And the kids report making new friends, which is great because that isn't always the case. I think there had been a lot of families that were really, really concerned that, they weren't sure whether their kids were actually making friends with the students in the classroom, even though they might talk about them all the time, but the kids reported that they were making friends. So I think those are the highlights. Things overall went well, and even though things go well, doesn't mean you can't still dislike things and be frustrated. I think Rhett spoke with someone who said, my kid's having a great experience, but I kind of hate that it's happening. So some of the challenges, I think the reporting that you're having a hard time making new friends came from some of the kiddos, but also from the families. And I think it really is just that disconnect between the parents who, could come down here and knew that Joe was playing with Bobby today and that they had a good friendship building. We don't have that connection to our kiddos on a daily basis. And from personal experience, it's hard to figure out who the families are in Montpelier, being this far disconnected and trying to set up play dates and get phone numbers and all that sort of stuff when you're not seeing people on a regular basis. The kids definitely felt that UES is overwhelming at times and chaotic. And, I think that's elementary school to some degree, but it is I think they articulated feeling like they were connected to all the students here, and when they lost that connection to all the students, it just felt like chaos and mayhem, but they didn't know how to react in that space. I think they have all grown through that process over the year, but they still find it to be overwhelming. Transportation certainly is a item that continues to need to be talked about. I think it has gotten a lot smoother over the course of the year. There were some major struggles in the beginning. And I think people appreciate some of the adjustments that were made and still have frustrations, but we as a board district can't manage all of those problems that have been being faced. And I think the sense of RVS kids and UES kids rather than everyone being UES kids was articulated by the parent group, but it also was articulated by the kids. And I think there was a middle school woman who was talking, and just like, we were talking about politics. And they were talking about how there's all these different changes happening in Montpelier. No one said anything about the select board politics that are happening in Roxbury. And like, my teachers didn't know that was happening. So I think there was this like us versus them in terms of what was being discussed, both at like an educational level, but also at the school level. You know, I've heard from parents that it might talk about a bunch of UES kids, but the only one that they're playing with at recess is a RVS kid. They still see themselves as RVS kids and have this cohort, which is a great thing. But at some point we've got to bridge that gap. Bridges has been incredibly helpful for bridging that gap. Like I said, Ms. Casey has been a consistent face along with others at UES, and having this space to be together as the cohort that they know has been helpful for them to maintain those connections, maybe with some other silence at UES and this separation of groups. But it is something that is incredibly valued by the kids that are making that transition right now and the families that are making that transition. I think that's the highlights I wanted to talk about. If you have anything else to add.
What is it that you asked me when you get the report and you disaggregate that data? I think that if there's going to be people that are in that area to fill in for all the agreement or all the experience that they've had in their life, and they're going to have a better time, especially if the environment that's what they're that's not unexpected. You know, thinking that I can go to the email and respond to it. Our company is not better closest to more people that we know are moving to, and so science is it's an endorsement of a sense. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, there's nobody here kind of forcing people, you know. That's a very optimistic way of looking at the lack of response. But I think that's the value. You know, we can talk about connecting families, companies, the kindergarten's probably it's a different story. You know, and I think that the idea that some community is there needs to be useful. But these kids have their cohort, you have to always going to be there. You know, kindergarten is coming through and have a very different experience. And I think that that's do we value diversity, or do we only value so, you know, I hope that I think that the kids that have managed to make friends, I hope that they can help their friends make friends. And I think it's going to be very different for kindergartners. And people said a problem. You know, men said, you know, my child is going to support it later. Or, you know, I think like
yeah. Oh, okay. Hogwarts is
Don't know. Not sure it's-
Just making sure.
but- So,
I think Brett's comment, but like, they.
Yeah, he doesn't have the context, it is going to be different. I think there's still a lot that can be done to help. At the community level, not necessarily district level, but connect the communities early on. You know, I think it's like. There was a lot of concern around the after school program, the access to the after school program, part two.
Pretty sure my family was the only one that used part two. Did you guys use it
no,
for a
we
while?
didn't use it, but we were there. And there were
Yeah.
only like 2.
I think we were the only family that signed up and used it at all. And I think there was this fear of just like the kids, maybe more. Being in a bigger space and not knowing kind of where they were, not knowing what the other after school opportunities are in Montpelier. And there really are a lot of great things that we've learned about since, you know, like going to the library and getting a Mangus roll. I think I talked to Jill about this. Like, we had no idea that existed. Whereas these other families, that was like what you grew up doing and started in before kindergarten. And so communicating with those folks of like what it is to be in Montpelier and be in that physical space once available to you is pretty essential early on.
And the remark about like discussing in classroom what the how what it was a decision in such a small town, I think is silly. And I think that like there are ways to sort of help kids understand both things better, all kids. Because the thing that I have the kind of identity and the kind of perspective that it is and seeing and that's the fact that people talk about. And I think it's good that we're going to be consistent. We potentially be more important and more about. No, it's not a good podcast, so you curriculum training board that was sort of the 4.5, and it was the same as the community law and that's the same. That's for 10% of what it is. Use on the resources, so. We're talking.
I think they are always willing to share. It's awesome. Miss Casey might have brought in popsicles too. I don't know what's happening in the back room. It's just sentiment, but. They were glad. You had to be good. They were. And I was surprised at how like thoughtful they were about it. Both and it was a great conversation.
Thank you. Oh, great. Oh, thank you. All right, Lynn.
Hi. Some of what was being said came through a little garbled. So if this question was already answered, apologies in advance. But, you know, we put a lot of time into having the beginning of that whole transition process happen. And I'm wondering now that we've had a year under our belts and there's feedback, is there any group how will those concerns or issues get followed up on?
My thought is it depends on what the challenge is, because different groups, I think, would be responsible for different challenges. Like, for instance, I had a conversation with me and Jill when we were looking through the survey. And I don't know how parents' phone numbers are shared. It just doesn't get raised to my level. Also, I asked Mia, how'd your kids, you know, how do you do that at UES? And it's mainly an MRPS pie conversation. And sometimes it happens well, and sometimes it doesn't happen well. So I think Rachel is here in the audience nodding her head at me. I think she's probably making mental note that like, that's something we need to work out with pie, right? Because that's not UES's responsibility necessarily. Other challenges around transportation. We'll continue to think about transportation and how we can do that best. I know adding a monitor to both buses changed the story there a lot, when we were able to hire another bus monitor. So we now have two, right? One on each bus. That really helped or seemed to help quite a bit. So just looking at Casey to make sure that's an accurate.
Yeah, that is
statement.
accurate. I think
Right.
most of the frustration now is around the
blanks
scheduling
in the
and-
schedule, yeah.
well, not even the length so much. I think like people don't like it, but it
Right.
is what it is. And I think there's folks feel like they would like the opportunity to weigh in on the schedule and the route, not to say what it should be, but like get it soon enough that we can say like, this doesn't actually make sense for like the bus comes way back here when another bus is going right by it. There were some weird things that have happened this past year.
So those are things we can pass on to the bus company in getting those. I don't know if they change them, but
yeah.
And so it depends. So to answer your question, long answer to your question, Lynn, I think it depends on what the challenge is. You know, certainly curriculum wise, I think it's an excellent Venn diagram to talk about the governance structures in Roxbury versus the governance structure in Montpelier, right? They're actually pretty similar, except just larger in one town than the other. Like those are, when Rhett was talking about that example, that one small example, I think that's an excellent Venn diagram opportunity to compare and contrast, which is a skill we need our kids to do. So that may just be an awareness piece for our teachers to think about, you know, which is something I see Mike and Rachel both in the audience nodding their heads at us. So I think we can always do a better job or continue to think about communications and how we connect all of our families, and how we're working with our caregiver groups to help that as well, to make sure everybody feels like they belong in our schools, because that's what our goal is. So we will continue to do that. And any specific feedback, I know all of my principals would love to hear that feedback.
The other piece that you raised, Casey, about not being aware of all the different opportunities and all the things that that maybe come a little bit more naturally to people who are living in Montpelier. I know at about this point last year, one of our caregivers put together a Google Doc that had that information, and I think there was a real effort to be made to get that out, but it seems like, you know, better, stronger efforts.
There's a lot of
figure out
information coming out.
Yeah.
and then figure out what are the avenues that will actually get it in front of people. You know, maybe it's the thing that goes out in the final principals newsletter of the year, or, you know, like I think we can connect a few more dots with things like that, because that information is knowable and you should have it. Yeah.
Well,
So
I just wonder if it would be useful to have some kind of collection process for those things, because people don't always know who to talk to. You know, they're more likely to just be a little bit unhappy about it and rather than try to figure out who can solve it. You know, is there any way to like just collect a list of things that people need figured out and or addressed somehow so that they understand the process?
Well,
I don't know if
think
that would be helpful, but I feel like, you know, we put a lot of work into making the transition begin, and I don't want to just leave people hanging, figuring out how to fit in and how to address some of the concerns that they have.
I mean, I would say we're attempting to do that right now, you know, having sent out the survey and then Rhett and Casey going to basically hold a listening session at the end of Bridges was our attempt to collect that information of what's been going well and what still needs addressing. And I think now, having heard it, we've got a couple of different action items, like, you know, when I get home, I can pull up that Google Doc and get it to you. And we can also figure out a better systematic way to do it. So it's not just me giving it to Casey. And then, you know, like we said, you know, getting in those requests for hearing what the bus schedule is a little earlier in the summer, if possible. I think we have that stuff now, and to the extent that there are things that we can do about them, I think we've got the people who can tackle them. Any other questions or thoughts? All right, Casey. Can we get you in front of the hot mic?
Share it with me, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Casey.
Sorry, I was in the. Sorry about talking.
Probably talked to most of you at some point or another, but Casey, the Bridges program, I've been doing this for, I think this is year 12 here. In the summer, you can find me hanging out in Northfield or Williamstown, coordinating the summer program, depending on the place. But yeah, so that's our after school program. I will say that this year, these are some pretty great kids. When we started this year, I'll be honest, I wasn't entirely sure what our program was going to look like by June. I wasn't sure, what we were going to do with 40 less minutes of time. We used to have kids at, 2:20, or when COVID happened, we had them at 1 o'clock every day. We know how to run the long game, for sure. And honestly, I'm not sure if anyone would still want to come June. I hope they would, but at the same time, I'm always glad to hear about their exciting things that they've done at going to Nangi's, or some kids take a turn at Wilder Arts, or, those are always exciting things to hear. Sometimes I'm like, hey, what are they doing? But anyway, never, I'm sure footing's never super fun, but I feel like we knew the important things. We knew families wanted to connect with their community and friends. They wanted enriching after school activities. We know how to do that. They didn't want me to feed the kids sugar 10 minutes before they pick them up. Solid. Don't always promise that, but sometimes, no. Anyway, but the things we did know is that we had an amazing amount of community support. We had a board that was brave enough to be like, hey, send it. We're going to give it a try. We're going to keep running this. We'll see what happens. We had, some fabulous staff members that they're brave. I come up with some ideas, they come up with some ideas, and we're like, we'll give it a try. We'll see what happens. And they jump in to some controlled chaos, but they do it with both feet. And most importantly, we had some kids that we wanted to make sure really still got to connect with each other and with anybody who lived in Montpelier who wanted to join us. Anybody that was homeschooled and still wanted to join us. Anybody that maybe when we included Vermont Farm and Forest School this year, based in Roxbury, and if they wanted to join us. And so really kind of what we're about. We're about connections. Perfect. So yeah, our goal is, I don't usually get the chance to talk to you guys about what we do, so I'm going to take a minute. I apologize. But our goal is for kids to explore and learn and grow, and everybody to make connections, to make messes, to have a real sense of belonging, some ownership over their program, and really celebrate everybody who joins us and who they are, where they come from. We do every day we do a quick share about our day, thumbs up, thumbs down, that kind of a thing. And one of the things that is I'm regularly saying is, hey, everybody in this room is just as important as someone else. Everybody deserves to be heard. And, and after you've had an hour-long bus ride and you've given it all day at school, how easy to do that. And so it's something that the kids, I think, really acknowledge, that everybody is important. And so anyhow, but that's really what our plan is and what we stand for. And this, you're looking at some of our enrollment forms. So how our program works, if you don't know, is every 6 or 8 weeks. Next year, we're going to run Drew's schedule, because Drew's been doing it that way, and I think that it might make things a little bit easier. And he does it every 2 months, but it's about the same time frame. But I happy to not make my own calendar. But every 6 or 8 weeks, somewhere in that middle, we switch activities. But if you signed up on Tuesday to, do simple sewing every Tuesday, that's what you're going to be doing. The idea is that at some point, toward the end of the activity, it's going to have a culminating activity, whether that be a play or it be that you made a little dinner type thing and you served it to your family that's shown up. We regularly survey the kids, ask them, what do you guys want to do? What are you interested in? What's exciting to you? Try really hard to create leadership opportunities and encourage kids, if there's something that you're an expert on, let's do it. Let's do an activity. You can teach it, and so we'll sit down with them, teach them how to do a lesson plan, do it with them. Yeah, it's a really good opportunity for them to show what they're excited about and what they know as well. I've already got it in the works for the fall. Kids have been asking to write another book. We published a book last year. We did not do that this year, but I'm pretty excited that they want to be authors again. So I'm pretty excited about that. This is our small bar graph, but this year we served 56 students. Out of that 56, 46 of them attended more than 2 sessions. We had 6 sessions in all. 8 of them only attended 1 session. We did have one family that part 2 works better for them. I was excited. I still get to connect with that kid, and just was what it was. And 6 friends came from Vermont Farming Forest. I did not put in how many homeschool friends we have. We have in total, there are 6 homeschool friends who join us. Sorry, my thing is not quite as fast, or I'm not. Part of our deal is we're constantly trying to create partnerships with local businesses. We convince, usually have to work too hard to convince local community members to come in. This year, we partnered with Roxbury Rising, the Roxbury Free Library, Norwich, Northfield Ninjas, the Arts Bus, the New England Nordic Ski Association, the D'Amicos who are behind us, CVSU After School, and some others, lots of individual people. Moonlight Mountain Farms is also one. This picture you're looking at is the Roxbury Free Library sponsored the No Strings Marionette joining us. And they came and put on a puppet show. And then the kids got to learn about how the puppets work and try them all out. And it's a pretty cool experience. And fun when you have lots of extra time and your parents are not like, hey, we're on the common and we need to leave. So they all got to give it a whirl. And we're hoping to have Barb come back. A few years ago, she came and did a puppet making workshop with us. She's, I think, going to come again in the fall. So that was pretty fun. So if you go to the D'Amicos, that's sort of that direction if you've been. They have a great space. I think some of you, I don't know if you've been, maybe. They have a great space. There's a stream. Actually, these kids are standing in that stream. This was in the fall. It's not very deep, and at this point, it had obviously dried up. But we used the Project Wild curriculum among some others. It's pretty great curriculum, and these kids were learning about adaptation. Then another place, I have like a handful of photos to just sort of show you some of the places. So we went rock climbing at Norwich. Super fun, amazing. They're awesome. They don't charge us to come. They hosted us every week. This was the first time we had a friend who lived in Montpelier who was like, I'm gonna try this out. And she joined us. She had a great time. It was super cool. This isn't all of them, but they learned about belaying, they learned how to tie knots, climbing strategies, skills, teamwork, all the things. It was super fun. They had a great time. Our Miss Caroline had that up. So architects and engineers, we do a fair bit of STEM activities. You'll see that again later in the slideshow. I've learned I don't take a lot of pictures of science and STEM, but it's probably because I'm usually elbow deep in it. And but These friends, we are lucky enough to have a parent that is, two parents actually, with an architect and an engineer. And so they came and did bridge building and dropped eggs. I don't think this is bridge building is pictured, but another thing they did was creating real floor plans. They learned what that looked like and how to show the doors open and that type of thing, the measurements for what their dream house might look like. That's pretty cool. So here you are looking at a variety of friends that did art activities. We're lucky. Candace Bauer joins us, and she is a resident artist. She used to work here as well, but has an amazing background in art. And kids learned about painting and sculpture and pottery and paper mache, a variety of things back and forth over the years or over the year. My first friend that's an angry penguin, which hysterical actually. And it's really nice to have that partnership. Christina at UES is amazing, and the kiln, and it's awesome. And then these friends, I think they were drawing a still life, but I think they derailed and were doing something really cool. So somehow they ended up with pastels, and it was a whole thing, but it was amazing, and she's really great. And I think I can't say that enough, how lucky we are to have some really great staff. We have Caroline, and she jumps in, she ran CrossFit this year, she headed up rock climbing, she sings and does all kinds of crazy cool stuff. She's directing our play. And then we've got Kelly as well, and she brings all of her knowledge of the natural world and gardening. And when it came time to start planting out here, I was like, "Shoo, you don't want me in charge of that, actually." If we want anything to grow, it's not me. But she jumped right in that. And then we actually have two volunteer people. We have Briley and her mom, Lori, Lori is a previous MRPS employee, but Briley also teaches at a dance school, and so she's been coming, and we have been offering kids a real dance class, which is kind of exciting. Next pictures you're looking at are this year we applied for a Nordic Rocks grant from the New England Nordic Ski Association. We received 25 pair of Nordic skis. They're pretty cool ones. You don't have to have ski boots, so they kind of bridge the gap. Like anybody can use them. And NEMSA heads up, like they have a ski team at Mad River, and there's a variety of them around. But part of that grant was connected with our UESP teachers, and they were super excited. They tried this year. It's a weird timing. Like the grant didn't come through until like November, December. And so getting it in this year made it a little bit tricky, but they're super excited. Next year they're going to do a ski unit. So that's the nice way to tie both places together. And we were lucky to have the Zajac family who are ski coaches. We had a kids night out. It was pretty fun. We did it on the Saturday after winter break started, hoping to give parents a little bit of time to do the things they needed to do, and root beer floats are always a hit. So another thing that we got to do, we had a few friends who went to Northfield Ninjas. They've been going, they're your kids, so 2 years, 3 years, yeah. And they loved it, and they always came, they came and told us all about it. And then some more kids started to go, but then there was this whole collection of kids that really wanted to be able to go, and for whatever reason they couldn't get there. And so we had a conversation. We already had the relationship with Norwich. Their wrestling coach was like, "Sure, bring as many kids as you want." And so the next thing we know, we had 15 or 20 kids going with Caroline or Kelly on Wednesdays, and they were wrestling. And I think some kids participated in the wrestling meet. We plan to do it again next year. So they will have that opportunity again. It was pretty cool. And wait, what?
Did the bus stop at?
The bus did stop at North. Actually, that was one of the things that I was going to say, is that The bus company has been incredibly amazing and flexible. Tatum and Stacy have been, they've bent over backwards to make sure that our kids can get dropped off at Norwich. They loop us by, drop them off. We try to find all kinds of things on the bus route that I can take advantage of. That's kind of, but they're amazing. Beyond appreciate them. And it just, yeah. It was, I don't know, the wrestling. I have to go back to that just for a minute because like one of the reasons I feel like that, you know, if you do after school that you do it is to give kids an opportunity to do things they might not do somewhere else. Or, you know, I think that's why we all do everything we do. But you know, I was at recess one day and I was talking to some fourth grade friends and one of them was a friend that hadn't been able to join and had wanted to. And actually two of them were, but there was like five of them and wrestling came up and they were, you know, they were just talking about it. And, you know, two of them were like, yeah, well, I'm going to do wrestling in college. And the fact that they had already started planning and that this had that impact on them, that they were thinking, wait a minute, like I can do this in school. I can be good at this. Like, and so I think it's kind of a neat tie together. This we participated in the after school ski program at Bolton. This we were super duper lucky to have lots of people who helped us out and went on our adventures. The particular child that you are seeing ski in this picture, you probably won't believe it, but this was her first day on skis ever. And she was scholarship by Roxbury Rising. It was pretty cool. We appreciate them and all of the things that they've done to help us. But she took her first lesson and she was, you know, we went over to the bunny hill at Bolton and she was like, oh, you know, she was super polite about it. She's like, well, what do I have to do to be able to go up the lift? I'm like, well, you have to be able to turn, you have to be able to stop. And, you know, and she's like, well, I think I can do that. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, show us what you got. And she could. Before the day was out, she was coming down mid-mountain. And she is 100%. I would not surprise me to see her on an alpine ski team at some point in her life. You went skiing with her, but she's a pretty cool kid. They're all pretty cool. It was nice to. Yeah, we had a lot of first time theater. Yeah. This is our lyrical and ballet class. They are they're getting ready for their recital on Tuesday. And it's turned into a little hip hop too, because they really liked hip hop. Not a very long clip. They're super cute. They'll have little tie-dye t-shirts. They're pretty excited about them. Sweetheart, I'm not sure. I always kind of call them Sweethearts because it used to be. But Cardinal Point in Northfield has also been. We got a $500 donation from them to go toward our ski program, our ski bussing and stuff as well. That was pretty amazing of them, and we got t-shirts from them as well. This was soap making and salsa. I had a point for this. I apologize. Anyway, this ties together, and you can pop to the next one. I just wanted to show the pictures. It tied together with our, some of you have wandered through and saw that we were making ricotta today, or solidly giving it a go. And it was, we hatched chicks. This is our farming garden activity on Wednesdays. Everybody the same activity this session. But that's because there's so much of it that you can divide. We had Kristen Gettler come in and showed us how to make shiitake a thing and get it to grow. She also, the purpose of her visit was to show kids that, you know, farming and gardening in Vermont isn't just, you know, a hobby or just like have a goat in your backyard. Kind of, you know, it's, you can have a whole business. This can be a thing, you know, you need to know all of the ins and outs of that too. She runs a flower business as well. So I'm pretty excited. This was one of my last slides and just trying to show some of what we do. These friends had been learning about why snow is sticky and why it's not. And they were having a contest to see who could build the tallest snowman. And they had to figure out how much water to put in their mock snow to make it stick together and all of that. Their snowman was pretty funny. They had a good time. I think they had more fun wrecking it at the end than I would have maybe liked, but that's okay. But art, we try to do a lot of makerspace tinkering, hands-on discovery. At one point we made some sleds and to figure out, what do you need to do? What can you use from these materials to go, faster down the hill? Ultimately, we're just always trying to figure out what we can do to support the school day curriculum and, get kids a little extra math without them knowing, a little, that kind of thing. I think this is almost my last. This is our friends, and it's my plug for our play. Please come watch. Thursday, the 12th, we're doing a really funny rendition of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's an improvised tale. It's going to be pretty hysterical. We've got 1st through 6th graders in it. There's some singing. I almost have them convinced to come and sing for you. It did not happen, but that is okay. I also figure that I've probably talked long enough, so that's okay. They're much cuter than I am, so but it's pretty funny. We get to go. So Joanna Sumner lives up the street here. She also this is her classroom at Northfield Middle High School, and it has everything you could ever have wanted to. There's wigs and suits and dresses and ball gowns and just all like jewelry, and you walk by some of the things that they chose, but they on Monday evening we all met and they got to go costuming. It was super fun, so their parents loved it. And then this was skiing, and I love this picture because it is sort of everything I feel like our after school program strives to be. You've got a couple of teachers from school. We have family members. There's both kids who live in Roxbury and kids who live in Montpelier in this picture, and they all, they're together and they all belong and they're happy, and that's, they feel like a family. And I bet if you ask any of those kids and any of those adults, they probably share a similar thought on that. But that's part of us.
You gotta send some of these pictures to Anna. They're awesome.
This is
They need to be
really
like
great.
in our yearly thing. They're so good.
I can
Yeah.
do that.
Thank you, Casey. Thanks.
But yeah.
Do any board members have questions for Casey about Bridget?
Really quick question. So first of all, I just want to thank you so much. I think like resounding bright spot of the last year for folks that I've been talking to in the Roxbury community is the program here. And the fact that yeah, you guys do such an amazing job. You mentioned 56 kiddos. What's the total enrollment from this community in our district?
There's 6. I don't know how many there are. I know how many there are at UES exactly, because that's the number we focused on. It's like 40 at UES.
So it's
I believe there's about 70 in the district.
okay. So it's a huge proportion.
Well,
And some of those 56 are not.
Not in everyone, but
Right.
well, they're not our students.
And some of them are not our students. Some of them are the farm and forest.
So of that, I think like the 6 farm and forest school friends attend. One of them, well, 2 of them both have siblings that are already at Main Street Middle School. And their siblings also come. And I know one of them is making the transition to UES next year. So really, I think a good thing for him now as friends, but like to make that transition a little bit easier. 2, I think, we reside in Northfield. One of them does live in Northfield. I don't usually get a public forum to say it, but I want to say thank you to, all of you and all of our community members and everybody who is, who stood behind our program, all of our staff, the kids for, being excited and all that, but I don't usually get a chance to, to say thank you. And I mean, I try every chance I get, but the public forum to do so.
Yeah, thank you very much.
But yeah, if anybody else has any questions, I'm always available. Sorry, I am long with.
Go talk about
bus.
Never get on the bus. I don't think that's what she meant. I don't think that's what she meant.
I guess. Yeah, I'm not good at answering any of those questions. I'm really good at talking to children. I do not always, give them a presentation.
You did great. Thank you. No, thank you so much. It was
Thank you, guys.
wonderful to see all of the richness of the program.
Yeah, I'll try and,
Yeah, you gotta get some of those to Hannah. They're awesome.
Fantastic.
They're super great. I love when you see all the pictures of the furniture, it's just like, oh, wait, it was really fun to go through and pick all of the things. Wait, what do I want to show?
Yeah,
But
that was hard to pick.
yeah, they do some pretty cool stuff and that's exciting. So,
Thank you. Thanks, Casey. Darn good effort. We did set aside some time for a second public comment period if we needed it. I don't think we don't have anybody in the room. Is there anyone? Okay. All right. Well, then let's welcome up Mike and Rachel. Are you coming to no, just Mike. Okay. For a presentation on our continuous improvement plan.
And before, as Mike's sitting down, we do have Rachel, Jason, and Julie are online if there's specific school-based questions.
Thank you.
So there is a presentation, no audio.
Thank goodness.
Come on.
Like syllabus day.
Yeah.
I think there's enough for now.
Like, these are the PDFs that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Lynn and Jim aren't here, so I think, but I think Lynn will see the slides, right? Because she's online, so she's gonna she can see what we're seeing.
That'll work.
Yeah.
So I'm here to talk to you about the CIP process and what has changed this past year from the agency of education compared to past years. And walk you through how we tackled this change this year and talk about the process a little bit. And then there is a connection to you all voting, supporting the CIP so that we can move forward with the federal grant. If we go to the next slide. So this year we had a different process for working on the CIP. Typically, in the past, it was one document from the district. This year there were some changes that required us to do it at a school level, which is actually a great thing. So we tackled this by forming a CIP work team that consisted of Emily Farron, high school, Rebecca Delaro, who's acting defense middle school, and Rachel, who was the UBS suspension at the time, and now the principal. And this team, we would meet and we would work through the steps in the process, and then each of them would go back to their school leaders and work with their leaders and their guide forward and their parent council. So it was a nice way to tackle the work. So we can go to the next slide.
Also a nice indicator of shared leadership as
Yeah.
well. I'd say Rebecca's working on getting her director of curriculum license. Rachel's obviously moving into the principal's, and the assistant principal role. So it's a nice shared leadership model.
So what happened is, it was kind of interesting. So the previous CIP process was that the district would create a plan that would last 2 years. We got 1 year into that 2 year process, and the AOE said, we're changing this to 1 year. So that was kind of a trip up because we spent some serious time thinking about what the 2 year goals would look like. So some of the goals that you'll see here are just a continuation of that 2 year process because they were real goals that we put energy into. So you'll see some of that connection there. They felt that the reason for this change was to support and serve all students. They felt that they got some feedback from the field that there would be a better way to do that. And then the last bullet was to support the compliance, which I think is the real reason the change was there. And also it's a positive change. So all good things there. So part of the process that gets confusing, and I think that the Agency of Education is starting to try to separate this. There is this element of continuous school improvement that we want to embrace and do. And all of these are connected to our federal funding, which
kind of muddies the water sometimes, but it's getting better. That we're able to really think about what the schools need at the school level and still comply with what's required for the federal fund. So one of the things that is needed is a comprehensive needs assessment, and we go through each of these components. Some of these things are extremely redundant and just required. Some of them are really healthy conversations around school improvement. So the CNA is one component of something that we have to submit within the CIP process. Go to the next one. Another thing that we have to submit is a data inventory, which actually is fantastically unique in our district because we've been getting a lot of time and a lot of reps to data and data reporting. So this is specifically required for consolidated federal grants, not required for the CIP, but it has to comply with everything you say in the CIP. So the great news is everything that we're working on falls under the umbrella of equity, academic learning, instruction, social emotional learning, school engagement. So everything. And what we do for our data inventory is we take our last data report that we shared with all of you in the winter. That's our data inventory. So far, people have been very impressed by the amount of data that we're providing. Next slide. So it's important to know that the CIP template, there's not a lot of leeway in how our goals are articulated or what areas they are in. You have to have one goal in academic learning and instruction. We have to have one goal in social health, which is fine because that's what we would want to do anyways. But when you see the formatting, it's required and there's not a lot of wiggle room in how we format those goals and submit those specs. They have to be clear, measurable goal statements, and there's some specific things that we need to address within the templates that are required. So these are the goals. You can't quite see them on the screen there, at least I can. But I'll walk through them a little bit, and then as we get to the end, we'll have some time for questions for the principals. Go through that. So the academic goals broken down. Union Elementary School by June of 2026, overall proficiency will increase by 5% in ELA and 10% in math on Rank Star and CAP. For Main Street Middle School, 80% of 5th and 6th graders will be proficient or above in ELA, and 60% will be proficient or above in math as measured by local and state assessments. Also, 85% of 7th and 8th graders will be proficient or above in ELA, and 80% will be proficient or above in math as measured by local and state assessments. And then 75% of 5th and 8th graders will be proficient or above in science as measured by state and local assessments, because those are the grade levels of those assessments. And then at Montpelier High School, collaborative teams will regularly interact to address common issues regarding school initiatives to increase proficiency by 8% in ELA, 19% in math, and 11% in science, and decrease the opportunity gap between IEP students and non-IEP students. And I'll let Jason address this later, but that's some evidence of the previous 2-year goal as well. That's some of the similar language that we're working on. And then in safe and healthy schools, the goals for Union Elementary are 80% or more of UBS learners will experience a strong sense of belonging. For Main Street Middle School, 100% of MSMS faculty staff feel like they belong, as evidenced by surveys given by the principal. The percent of learners who experience a strong sense of engagement will increase by 15% from baseline data. The percent of learners who form a leadership roles will increase by 20%. And then at the high school, collaborative teams will regularly interact to address common issues regarding school belonging initiatives to increase students' overall sense of belonging by 10%. And then you have the links to the actual plans, and in your folders, you have the actual plans. But on the last slide, Libby and I were talking about this recently. This process is meant to be really fluid. I know that there's a vote involved in this tonight. That does not mean that these don't get updated, changed, more specific, more action-oriented as we go, as we get more data, as we analyze all of that. So on this last slide, the schools have kind of outlined some of the things that they would do to address these goals. truth be told, I could probably have doubled this slide 3 times over with the list as it really went. There's a lot of discussion going on, and we're talking about how to really address this stuff specifically at the school level and at the district level. So that's kind of the details about the change in the process of the CIP. I can answer any questions about that, but then if you have specific questions for the people that are already so.
We'll open it up to the board for questions.
I just had a little one on safely healthy goal.
Go for it.
The one about the percentage of learners in formal leadership roles will increase by 20%. What would be a formal leadership role? And if there's only so many leadership roles, like is that?
That one's under Main Street Middle School.
Yeah.
Those of you following along at home.
Jules, you want to take that?
Yeah. Hi, sorry. Yeah, so we have right now in our building, we've had 2 different leadership groups that have been working. So we have our sustained leadership program that Don Taylor has been working with for years. And then the last few years, we've Lauren Singer, our SEL coach, has also helped lead an SEL group that used to be operated through Up for Learning. And that group is going to continue to do that work. And then Jess Wells and I are going to be, so in looking at overall, like the opportunities for leadership for students in the middle school, we noticed that there was some places where there were some students who were overlapping in both of those groups. And we have lots of students who are really interested. So we want to try and find ways that we can expand leadership by not having crossover. So that way we have more opportunities for students. And then Jess Wells and I are also going to be adding an additional leadership group that isn't quite like a traditional student council kind of thing, but it'll be an opportunity to have like 5 5th or 5 6 7th graders and 5 8th graders in a TA structure with her and I. And we'll do some leadership development, but then also be thinking about like, how do we take the students' perspectives on how we run school, if there's changes or things like that, just as another opportunity to provide student voice. Does that answer?
And it looks like Jake has a question.
Yeah, I'm curious about how the academic goals were developed, and when you did this in the past, like last year or whatever, did you meet the goals that you set at that time, or how does that evolve?
So those we set in the past for 2 years out, we haven't got to that 2-year mark. So, but we were working on those, and big part of that was how do we benchmark on the data. So I would say that we're progressing really well in understanding our data for it and how that works. This year, because of the change, one of the positive aspect was there was a lot more discussion at the school level about the goals. So I defer to the principals about how they chose these goals. But there, in the past, because it was a district level, I don't think that there was much focus opportunity for conversation. We certainly had more parental involvement in this round of CIP development than we've had in the past. Guiding coalitions were involved in this much more than we had been in the past. So I think that played a role in how we were developed. I'll turn it over to the principals. I mean, Rachel's here, so.
So it's
Come on up to the mic,
kind of like a new world because it's school by school, and this looks like 1-year goals, whereas before it used to be 2 years.
Not making a joke. The year before the 2-year goal, it was 1 year, and it was both schools and the district. And the year before that, it was different as well. And then it was 2 years just for district. Now it's just for schools, not the district 1 year.
Welcome to our world. It's magical.
But I'm not making a joke. That's really
Elastic.
Great.
Rachel, how did you answer?
Yeah, so as Mike mentioned before, we had already set this 2-year goal as a school. And so we just continued because the work is ongoing, just continue to maintain the same goal. Because that work has been really strong this year. We just want to continue to grow and improve on that. And so some things that we are looking at, we still kind of have some of the same problems in practice. We have more students accessing tier 3 intervention supports in math and literacy than we would like to see, because that number is much just smaller than it is. And so we work from that problem of practice and then look at what are the primary and secondary drivers that helps to inform the goal. And so one of the things that we know we need to do is we can't like carry our way out of academic situations. We need to make sure that we're laying down solid frameworks in terms of our tier 1 and tier 2 instruction. And so like creating the alignment work that we've done and the letters professional development that we've done for literacy is helping to strengthen that tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 instruction. And then also we are going to, one of the things mentioned here with our action plan is to have a coherent paid-for resource around that. And so we're going to be starting that work next year with a program that's already beginning into the most full called Open. And so we'll be providing training and implementation support for that. And the other pieces, we have these in our collaborative teams, our Franco collaborative team, in order to strengthen our tier 2 instruction. We are looking for a classroom-based additional support provided by classroom teachers mainly. We are engaging in these teaching assessment cycles where collaborative teams, Franco hosting like roughly 4-week cycles. They're choosing a content area, standard, and then a skill. They're assessing based on a very targeted skill. They're looking at the data. They're creating groupings of what type of instruction in that skill. And then they're moving forward. There's like 2 to 3 weeks of teaching happening in the midst, of that. We're coming together to talk about instructional practices from at the tier 2 level. What support are we providing? What maybe needs to be touched upon at tier 1? How can tier 3 providers be supporting that work as well? And so those are the kinds of things that are happening already. And so it just really felt like the work needs to be to continue strengthening those and really make sure that we are increasing teacher ownership of those processes. And so moving forward, really doing that work, which is really like internalizing what we do every day.
Julie, you want to talk about how MSMS came up with your academic goals?
Sure. So we really took our goals from the 2-year plan that we had last year. We had already made some initial gains on that because that initial 2-year goal, because we have to write those things in the middle of the year, was actually, kind of set in motion before we had our VCAT scores from that last year. And so we looked at our historical data for where our students were in that, and then tried to pick goals that we felt that were a little aspirational. So it was going to be something that was going to give us a good push based on our historical data that we know about how students have typically performed at MSMS on those different tests, and something that's going to, be still doable. So one of the things that we did when we had the 2-year plan where it talked about percentage increases for each of the 3 different subject areas, one of the things that we did was to break that down into like the number of students, right? And so, when we talk about a 10% increase in the number of students from the past, we're looking at about 8 or 9 students per grade level. So thinking about, 2 or 3 students in each of our classrooms, how do we help move them up to that level of proficiency? And so we've been doing a lot of work, like Rachel has talked about, and it feels doable. It feels a little aspirational and it feels doable. So it feels like it's the right size bite for us to move forward.
And Jason or Emily, I see Emily's on here too, so I can call her out. But Jason, you can start.
Sure. Similar from what Rachel and Julie's described as when we started that goal. But if you think about the math goal, which I think was 19% increase over those 2 years, when Mike and I first discussed that, a year or 2 ago, when you look at that, it's only like less than 20 students to move to proficiency on the math VCAP. So we figured out that seems reasonable over that course of time to move students into the green proficiency area. And then as a faculty and staff, we've been working all year, both in our CTs and our faculty meetings about identifying that opportunity gap between students on an IEP and non-IEP.
I have a follow-up question, but I was waiting to see if Emily wanted to chime in.
You want to chime in?
Sure, yeah, sorry, my connection is not great, so it's a little laggy. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add from what Jason said, other than we're just really looking at our specific groups of students in kind of each sort of achievement category, and really thinking about what it would take to kind of move those numbers. So just really thinking about the needs of our specific learners and what we could do differently in the future.
Thank you. I'm curious to know from either Jason or Emily, are there any examples that you've identified that would kind of give us a little bit more of a picture of what you mean by that opportunity gap between students who are on an IEP and students who are not on an IEP?
I mean, things that we're identifying through the students who aren't doing well, let's say across the board academically, some of those things in the opportunity gap that are out of our control. So we're trying to take control of those opportunities to ensure that students can remove the barriers, let's say, outside of the IEP. So like we are picking kids up from places, and Leslie drives 5 or 6 students every day to get to MHS on time so they can access their classes rather than being late or absent. We've been working with Nick, Catherine, Emily, and I think that's it, and Leslie as our attendance team to ensure that students have the opportunity to attend their classes. And then as a department and faculty, we're also really looking at our Solon block data to ensure that those students who are, let's say, not at proficient, have that opportunity for Solon block and are being called back in a timely manner, not only for intervention, but for that relearning and opportunity to retake to move forward. Plus, the math department itself in this instance has been working really hard with Amy Kimball, and they worked with Julie and Libby and Mike this year to kind of revamp the math curriculum moving forward so that they can be better aligned as a team also, both not only in Algebra 1, but Geometry and Algebra 2.
Great, thank you.
I just have to say that what makes me so proud of what you all just heard from the principals is they're all describing a similar process and system of how we go about educating our learners, particularly those who struggle. And if 5 years ago, 4 years ago, we could not have, that was our goal, that was our wish, it was our hope. And so just hearing Jason just talk about the systems and how we can remove systematic barriers to increase opportunities for kids instead of saying you are not coming to class, right? Like it's a different shift and it's a different mindset. And I don't think we're there yet. However, the work that's being done across all 3 schools, similar systems done differently because they have different level kids, different structures in their schools. But it's just a beautiful thing for them to hear them all talking the same language.
Cool. I have another question on, I'm guessing that, Union specifically mentions VT-CAP, but I'm guessing that all of these are using VT-CAP as far as the main.
Yeah, and that was, again, going back to the 2-year plan, the advice from the AOE at that time was to use VT-CAP as the source document. That advice has since changed. So
that wasn't even going to be my question.
Yeah,
but
we're going to try and get more specific about the data as well as we go. And again, our data story from 4 years ago to today is still much clearer and better. That I would anticipate us adjusting these goals to work with local data, work with better data.
Got it.
That we don't wait 7 months for.
Yeah, well, that was sort of my question was,
yeah.
We'll, in June of 2026, those students will take those tests, but we won't know until maybe that fall, if, ideally it's sooner, but what we've experienced so far is that there's a lag. So we won't, anyway.
VCAP is an excellent indicator of our program, right? That's what we use that for. One of the things that Nick is saying quite a bit right now with him moving to a full-time position is we're a pretty good system what are the small things we need to do as a leadership team to become a fantastic system? And one of the areas that I know he's paying a lot of attention to with Mike is where can we be more intentional? Like VCAP scores are things we put in here for the Agency of Education. So we can't just sit back and be like, yeah, we're going to wait for our VCAP scores. So how are we as a leadership team having a data agenda, Nick calls it, so that we're all looking at our data collectively and like with a scorecard almost monthly and saying, what can we do better? What I want to get to is say, at UES, we made this shift or change, and this is the reaction of that. This is what happened because of what we did as a system. Rather than saying, yep, that cohort, like our numbers doing this, which means it's based on the cohort of kid, not on the system in which they're in. So we want to be that intentional and targeted. We're not there yet with most of our systems, but we're getting there most definitely, of being able to say, we made this change, this systemic change. And because we made that systemic change, kids are now doing this. And being able to celebrate that, or saying what went wrong because kids are now doing this, you know, the flip side. So that's where we'd like to get.
Got it. All right, I have a question for Julie. The goal of getting 100% of the faculty staff to feel like they belong is very aspirational. It's awesome. It's awesome. I have two curiosities. One is the climate survey that we just did, that the board did, show that I think it's like somewhere around 63% maybe at MSMS. So you've got a big jump to go. And I looked it up after I read this. I didn't know it. I didn't remember from like 2 months ago. And I'm curious to know if you give different surveys than in addition to the climate survey, Julie.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're hoping to develop this like summer and into the fall is a couple other tools just to get some additional information. So we do have the panorama surveys for student information and wanting to think about how we can do more timely feedback from our staff over time, just so that we can be getting temperature gauges throughout the whole year. And that way, if we need to be shifting or changing things, we're getting that feedback and that information. And yes, it is aspirational. But I think when you talk about belonging, it's really hard to put a number that doesn't feel like it's 100%, because I don't know how we would not want anyone, like how we would want to shoot for something where someone is not going to belong.
Yeah, I get that.
That's Julie's line. She's my math woman. She says that a lot. Why would we shoot for anything less, Liv?
Yeah, I get it. And I think that's cool that you'll have a few more touches throughout the year.
It's kind of like an internal board question. Last spring, I think it was, we did MRPS, vision, approach, values, priorities, where we had goals that some of them were very related, like similar-ish to this kind of thing.
Yep.
So my question is, why do we do that? Why don't we adopt what the experts say is what their goals are and go from there?
It's a great question. I think we didn't have, this is another thing where we've been working for a long time to align our systems where we were not as in tune previously when we were developing those as to what was happening with the school leadership. And so we were doing the best we could, knowing that we should have some goals that we want to hold ourselves and the district accountable to. But I think you're raising a really excellent point, and I think we should be more aligned. That's my opinion anyway, with what our educational experts are striving for.
Yes, and I think there are times when unexpected challenges or choices that need to be made, where when there may not be enough time for the board to deliberate, and I don't know if that fits your academics, but somehow our local values should support process where students have to be made And not a lot of time, it's one thing being off that, what they're expecting and say that, well, I don't know what, but I don't know, could be anything, could be,
Maybe then we'll just go.
yeah, I mean, or it could just be like, you know, a wave of social media comments that are like very contradictory and not helping people when we do this, or you know, what I don't know, like kids protesting by which we want to support, right? Or just kids walking around school or protesting, you know, I mean. So I'm not disagreeing with following along, but I also just think a structure that supports is kind of something I'm doing, but things that are, you know, necessarily, you know, like 1% academic increase, you know, we have to improve, but it seems like, whatever the number is, it seems like that's obvious, but it's like there are a lot of things that I think go into the whole system that, I don't know.
100%.
Yeah, so I don't know how to figure out where there is overlap and where there isn't overlap. And sort of revisit approach the work that we're trying to do because.
No, I totally agree. I'm just saying, like, if you look at that document, there's a lot of stuff in it besides just academic goals. But you know, we kind of start with what the experts say, and then we do like what you're saying, Rhett, is like, how do we support that stuff and complement it? But if they say that 5% in this school in this subject matter is what they're going for, then I think that I definitely defer to them on that.
Yeah, I had a very similar thought, to what Jake just was talking about, and I'm thinking about the work that we were doing right before I left the equity and now equity engagement committee, right? And when Anna sort of stepped in and was like, these are the things that we're already doing, it made sense to take the board's goals and measures and align them with the work that's already being done, because Anna was the expert, right? And so I see a lot of opportunity in those other two themes to align with what our experts are saying, is what a goal should look like. So yeah, I think we already have a model for how that can happen, because we did it at least with the one goal that we did.
You're talking about around community engagement and communication. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions for our experts or comments on the CIPs for the each school?
The rest of the it's awesome to awesome to hear you say that this is where you want it to be.
So glad that you're a part of this program and
Yeah.
you know that you're so integrated in this process and now you're going to be in the role that you're in. It's really great stuff.
Yeah.
Mike, did you create the presentation?
The slides.
The slides?
Yeah, and these are we use the same set of slides for the family groups at each school to explain the process.
What did you use?
It's just a Google template. I did not create it.
Yeah,
I was like,
it's real
wow, this is awesome.
I'm colorblind.
I mean, it's not that different than
Yeah,
the slides, but this man is
colorblind.
action.
He has no idea what this looks like.
A very nice shade of gray.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Oh, I did actually, because you mentioned the caregiver groups, I am just, for a final question, curious to know what that those conversations look like. Do you present like, this is what we're thinking, and then get their feedback, or were you thinking like, how would you see us implement this? You know, at what part did you get their
Yeah,
input?
so the CIP work group, we met and talked about what should go into the presentation. We put together this common presentation so that all families would see the same information across schools. And then they all approached their family groups as it was appropriate. We got some feedback on the goals, and the great news is that a lot of these folks are involved in those groups already. So they kind of knew the concerns and the questions of the community, and kind of were able to speak to that in that process. And then brought it back to the principals and the guided coalitions and then to me, and decrease the size of them, which was much better than in the past. So we had minimal opportunity to interact with them. So that was a good side effect of it.
Great. All right, and you need a vote.
Yes, please.
So I think the motion would be to approve the CIPs of each school. Do we have, is there a motion?
I believe that's for that for UES, MSN, and
There a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Right, discussion?
I'm just, we have to approve it because that's what the AOE says. Oh.
We
Sounds
literally
good.
have to put the date in.
Yeah.
I can put it in there. Thanks for the video.
Wow. You want me to sign it?
Should be fine. I'll come back to you if I get it.
I do think this is a good step too, because it's, who knows, maybe a school leadership team would not bring it before the board if they didn't have to get board approval. Ours probably would anyway, but maybe there's one out there that wouldn't. And then this is a good connection because now when we see our data presentations from you all 3 times a year, we've already seen this and we can say, oh, okay, so now let me compare where you say you're at or where the data shows we're at with the goal that we're striving for by the end of the year. It is a formality, but I do also appreciate it.
Well, I think it's also helpful, right? For what the reasons that Jake was asking.
Absolutely.
Like, why would we be setting these goals over here that are different, worded different metrics, different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Great, so. Yes, I know. So any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It was at 8:07 PM, just in case that.
I got it. Don't worry.
Great. So we have then policy readings, the 3rd reading of the student conduct and discipline policy. Jill, has this changed at all since we've seen it? Okay, previously? Are there any questions from board members? Okay, I don't think we vote, right? No, this is just to see if there's any questions or comments.
Yeah, and the policy committee didn't meet in May, so we are meeting next week, and that's when we're gonna take a deeper look at this. It's pretty prescriptive, we can't really change much. But the things we talked about in the past are still sort of, we want to make sure that we can talk about it here because we want to make sure we do get like student and family awareness of this policy before we go.
Absolutely.
Do you want to move this to policy to warn it as an adopted policy next time? For next board meeting? Or you know what, you don't need to decide that right now. We're just talking policy committee.
Yeah, barring any objections from the policy committee. I mean, like I said, we'll talk about it next week, but yeah, we could. I don't
Plan for it.
Yeah, we can plan on it and we can always.
Yeah, just let us know when the meeting's done, which way to go. Either, I guess it could go to a 4th reading, or we could put it in a consent to pass as a policy. Okay, great. And then we have policy monitoring for C9, Federal Child Nutrition Wellness Act. Is there a motion to approve this monitoring report?
We'll move to approve the monitoring report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's great. So then we have the final item on the agenda, which we added at the beginning of the meeting for discussion on the climate survey summary. Scott, you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah, I can't remember in previous years, but have we, are we, I guess sort of related to my question right before my class, like we need to approve, what do we need to do with this other than read it?
Nothing. I mean, officially, no, nothing. The value of getting it into the consent agenda is then it gets it out to the community. It's a way, and it was the first time we did that was last year. We hadn't done it in previous years, and we did it upon Tim's suggestion last year. And yeah, it's just it's sort of like the warrants and the accounts payable. It's a way of form of transparency with the community.
That's awesome. I mean, I think there's a lot of really valuable information in there, and so I was glad that. I was glad that it was there, and so I guess my question then would be like, what do we do? What, if anything, should the board be doing with that information beyond just getting it out to the community?
Yep.
Like
The
I
board
saw.
does share it with the teachers, with the faculty and staff.
Uh-huh.
Just know that's another step.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I guess in like for us as a board, like
How do we use it?
Yeah, like what if anything we be doing with that information?
Yeah, so I have some thoughts on that and I'm
Yeah.
happy for others to share. For me, it's one reason that we try to keep this aligned with the evaluation process for Libby is that it's one resource for us to see very high level. How is her leadership landing as our staff experience being in our schools? So very high level there. That I think is the best way for board members to use it. I think if board members have specific questions for Libby about, well, how did she use it? I think that's also, because I know that you do a real deep dive with your leadership team into the information.
Yeah.
And then also like, what are the themes that they can learn that will help with new approaches to like, I don't know if that's what I don't know if this is what sparked Julie saying, oh, let's get a few more touch points during the year or not. Maybe she had that idea on her own already, but it shows up in their conversations as well, which isn't necessarily how we use it, but it's another valuable reason to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think from my end, one of the cool things that we kind of continued with this year was to have it identical, and we made a bunch of changes last year. I think in years past it would change regularly. So having a consistent set of questions, I think for me it's like a temperature check and sort of how should I be concerned about certain things and how concerned, that at a really high level. And as you saw from the data this year, I think like across the board, it was a really positive story.
There were some amazing, I mean, particularly, sorry, I cut you off, Tim, but like the climate overall going up so much and like the leadership going up so much was awesome. There were serious concerns, at least on like there was mental health concerns that I saw in there and issues around grit or perception of grit of the students. And so it's like, those are awesome. But then there was something around like relatively low scores around like the faculty and staff getting feedback on their work, or so I can't remember the
Was
exact
it the
word.
evaluation one?
Yeah, it was within, and so it's like so that's the piece where I was wondering like how do we or should we be doing with that?
I think the best thing is to ask, right? Like that's an excellent one. Everybody agrees our evaluation system is awful. Administrators and teachers alike, and that's one more piece of data that we have. And at the same time, we're working on our instructional framework in order to move into a growth model for evaluation. I'd rather call it a growth model for professionals. But we can't do that unless we have named our framework and a lot of teachers' time. So it's going to stay low for a while because that's what's in the contract, and we're not ready to change it yet.
The evaluation system.
The evaluation system. Yeah, exactly. So like the fact that that's low, like we were all like, yep, but when you see things like that, those are questions like, what do you do with that, Lib? Because that's a really good one.
Sorry, I totally cut you off.
No, that's a good point, and I agree with exactly what Libby said. I think that if something looks weird, then I think the response is to ask and flag it, and a reasonable explanation on that. We'll check.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep expect it to be back next year too, because we're not ready to change it yet.
But I do think it's worth highlighting, and I'm glad you pulled it out because it was, having gone through it in greater depth with that committee, I thought it was great, like what was obviously.
Did you want to ask any other question? You just mentioned a couple other things, grit and mental health. Did you?
Those are just like things that I saw, like as I was going through that were like that seemed like in the extremes, right? Like either extremely positive or like concerning, certainly with things around mental health. I mean, that's not something that we as a district are like uniquely dealing with, right? So, the other, and you pointed this out, Libby, and I appreciate it, in your like the beginning of the summary, the tool itself.
Mia wrote the summary, just the whole committee, the whole committee wrote the summary.
Yeah, the tool itself, right? The fact that there's not a like neutral, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, are we stuck with those questions, the way they're worded?
How Panorama does it, and they do it with all of our surveys, so when you see belonging data, it's the same measurement. And that's actually been a sticking point for our teachers quite a bit. And at the same time, we want kids to say, yeah, we want teachers to say, yeah, we're with you. When you have a middle choice, I know I choose middle choice quite a bit as a survey taker.
Very rarely a 5.
Yeah.
So that was me that wrote that something. So, but I would put a plug for being stuck with it for the purpose of consistency. And I think that explanation that Mia gave it was really good, because that's what we wanted to share with the board, that, there's just, you shouldn't put it positive and negative in the way that survey may imply on first blush.
Thank you.
Are there response levels, like
One, whatever, the 1 through 5, are they locked by Panorama?
Yeah.
So we couldn't change it anyway.
Yeah.
So we just have to
The
keep.
way to change it would be to change the tool, which we don't want to do because we did for a couple of years. And now we like that, we really value the consistency that it gives us.
Yeah.
And we have been, I do want to say, the last 2 leadership team meetings, the feedback from staff has been on the table as we're having our conversation split up a little bit. Like today we were talking about the equity plan and specific targeted ways. So what's the feedback we've received from teachers and community members in particular around this plan, and what were the themes that came out and which ones we're taking action on? So we're using this feedback quite a bit right now as it's planning time, right? So as we're working towards what next year looks like, it's great front and center for the leadership team's work.
And since we're talking about it, just one other top level highlight is that like 20 plus more people took the survey this year than last year. So we're getting more participation, which I'm loving.
I said it was like 150 or 160 respondents.
Yeah, which is great. So thank you, anybody watching who filled out the survey. Thank you for doing that. We're very glad to be getting this amount of feedback. And we know that it's not a short survey, so we appreciate you taking the time.
And anyone who thinks that AI could have done a better job comparing the results and writing it up is wrong. It's a lot of good detail and context here provided by humans.
I did do an AI. Sorry.
Yeah, it was not that great.
It wasn't as good.
Any other questions or thoughts on the climate survey? Right, well, I think we're all done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, so do we have to
Vote on that.
vote on it?
Take it out of the consent
No.
agenda.
I do have one question before we adjourn. Is there a status update on the transfer of the building?
Oh, thank you
ownership?
for asking.
So I checked in with Mark, our lawyer, just today, because I have some people who are getting anxious internally around that transfer, being my business manager and my facilities director. And he said they're having a hard time connecting with the Roxbury lawyer. However, they're planning on meeting at the end of this week or on Monday they have a transfer or purchase and sale agreement. Yeah.
So they're close, or has it been discussed?
Our lawyers have met.
They've met once. It sounds like, yeah.
So they may have to meet 2 more times if they don't agree on whatever the current status is, or,
I'm not sure.
yeah. Well, fingers crossed for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad that that happened today and that just in the setting that we're in,
Yeah.
good to address before we go.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I meant to say.
Is there a current deadline or like? July 1?
All right. Now
I'm up to adjourn.
a second.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Good. Thanks, everyone.